Welcome back to another boardroom briefing. I am Paul Maskill, and today we're going to talk about a move that feels responsible, it feels logical, and very urgent when cash gets tight, but almost never fixes the actual problem. What is it? It's cutting costs. So if your cash flow feels strained and your instinct is to immediately reduce expenses, pause and listen to this episode first. I see this happen way too many times, and it is the wrong move almost every time. This is not a message against discipline. This is not an argument for waste. Yes, we need to get rid of the things that are wasteful. If there's things we're paying for that we don't need, it has nothing to do with that. And it's definitely not about avoiding hard decisions. Today, like all of our conversations, this is a boardroom level conversation about why cost cutting is often the wrong first move and how it can quietly make cash flow problems worse instead of better. The key word there is quieter because it happens over time. Really, no decision from a financial standpoint that we make in our business, we're really going to see or feel the impact overnight. But when we continue to make those decisions over time, that's when all of a sudden it's like, wow, where did all my money go? Or, wow, we've been doing this for the last few months and I don't see a change. So here's where most people think, and it really comes down to just looking at the P&L. A lot of times when we look at the P&L, we just ignore the revenue and cost of goods sold completely, and we just go to the expenses when it comes time to why am I not financially healthy? So the illusion is if we cut enough, cash will improve, right? It has to. When cash gets tight, cost cutting feels like we are 100% in control, and we start eliminating things. Because like I said, when we look at P&L, we see all these expense line items. That's where we start to feel the pressure usually pretty immediately. It's like, wow, I can't believe we're spending that much on this category, or I can't believe our subscriptions are this, or I can't believe our office supplies are this. We need to cut back on things to stabilize. We need to get rid of overhead. Whatever it is, it's usually not right, even though this reaction is 100% understandable. Costs are visible. Costs feel actionable. We can see these things on our P&L. We can see them leaving our bank account. And cutting costs feels safer than touching anything when it comes to pricing or our technicians out in the field, structure, or strategy. It feels like that's just what we got to do first. First, we just got to cut costs all that we can. So we start trimming. We pause hiring. Maybe we get rid of some support roles in the office. We definitely start cutting marketing. I see this happen all the time, cutting marketing, or we're delaying investments. We're starting to squeeze our vendors a little bit much. None of these things are going to help us operate. But for a brief moment, it feels like relief. It feels like, oh man, we start doing the math like, oh, we just freed up $8,000 a month. And if we do that for a year, that's $100,000. And, we could really use that extra $100,000. But what is actually happening under the surface? Here's the actual problem. In most $5 to $10 million residential home service businesses, that's really, where I play at every single day. Cash flow problems are usually not caused by too much cost. We do financial assessments all the time. Again, there's content and episodes out there that I've put out. At the end of the year, I put out an episode, I believe, if not, it's on social media for sure, we looked at our last 70 financial assessments that we did on home service companies. And almost all of those 70 companies, cost was not the problem. That is not what's causing the cash flow problem. They're actually caused, like I talked about in previous episode, is misaligned contribution, if we want to call it that. What does that mean? Really means, are we charging what we need to charge based on what our cost of goods sold is, based on our labor material? So in other words, the business isn't generating enough margin for every job or per unit of work to comfortably fund the structure that it's carrying. Now, the flip side to that, you might be thinking, well, what if we just eliminate some of the structure? Well, we need that structure to support everything that's going out in the field usually. But when that's the case, cutting costs treats the symptom and not the disease. You probably heard this, in the medical terms a lot. We're treating the symptom, not the actual root cause of that. And that's what cutting costs is. It's treating the symptom. Hey, we don't have any money, so let's cut costs, which means we'll leave more money in the bank. But it's not actually solving the underlying problem. So most owners start, like I said, cutting what feels discretionary. Again, marketing spend is usually number one. Or maybe we need to change marketing agencies to go someone a little bit cheaper. I don't feel this agency is doing what they're supposed to. Maybe we cut training of like, man, if we have 10 people going through training twice a week, so that's like 20 hours multiplied by even $25 an hour. Wow, we can start to save a lot of money. Or maybe it's the support roles in the office. Like, I don't know if we need the dispatcher. What if our CSR does the dispatching like they used to? Or maybe we start to cut some of the technology that we use because, we think, well, we can live without it. But the reason those costs exist is usually to support all of the things out in the field, all the revenue that we're generating, all the labor, all the technicians, all the installers, all the apprentices. It's supporting everything they need to do, and it's supporting our ability to charge what we need to charge. So when they are cut, something else slowly, quietly deteriorates. What does that mean? So it means a lot of things. Maybe our lead quality or lead volume start to go down. Now, it's not going to start to go down tomorrow. It's going to slowly go down over time. And then when you compare month over month, year over year, then we start to realize that. One of the conversations I have with clients or potential clients often is they come to me and they're like, man, we're spending 10% on marketing and we're only at 3% net profit. And, what if we just cut our marketing, even down to like 3%, and then we add that extra 7% to the bottom line? Well, here's the thing. When we start to cut things like marketing, again, we're not going to feel it right away, but it will probably reduce our revenue over time. So it's actually not solving anything. Yes, we're cutting marketing expense, but now we're also cutting our revenue. And most likely we're cutting our gross profit as well, because the lead quality might not be as good, or our technicians, they don't have as many leads or opportunities every day. And maybe their mindset starts to shift of like, man, is this a safe place to work? Or the lower quality leads, they just aren't willing to pay the price that we charge, and they don't value what what we value. It could also, start to lead to discounting because we just don't have as many leads. So now we're really getting desperate and we just need revenue to come in the door to quote unquote keep the guys busy. And, we got to make payroll and we got to do all these things. So a lot of times when we start to cut that marketing, we don't feel it overnight, but it slowly happens over time. And when things slowly happen, we usually don't notice them. Let's look at training. I, alluded to it earlier, but when we start to cut training, what actually happens when we start to cut training? Well, our performance is probably going to go down. Yes, it's not going to go down tomorrow. If we skip training today for the first time, our performance will not go down starting tomorrow. But, if it comes to training our installers, is their skill set going to be as good? Or maybe it falls off a little bit and they can do a little bit they end up doing a little bit less revenue a day. Or if we look at our service technicians and comfort advisors, is their closing rate going to go down a little bit? Is their average ticket going to go down a little bit? Tying that back into marketing, now all of a sudden marketing, cutting in marketing plus less training, now it's really doing damage to our average ticket. And usually when those things happen, we start making excuses. Well, it's the time of year. Oh, the economy's bad. Oh, no one wants to spend any money, whatever it might be. Training might also cut callbacks. The efficiency is going to go down, which means callbacks are going to go up. Same thing with warranty work, or we got to go back out and do something again. There's a lot of things that when we start to, and if it's office training, then, maybe our CSR starts booking a little bit less percentage, or our dispatcher's doing a little bit less revenue a day, whatever it might be. And then throw in, if we start cutting one of those roles, we say, oh, they're only doing like 20 hours a week. We can live without them. Things start to slow down. Decision-making starts to slow down. Performance starts to drop because so-and-so has got too many things that they're focusing on. Mistakes are going to start to go up. Again, all these things, they slowly happen over time, but it's like compound interest. All of a sudden we look back 6 or 12 months and the money we thought we were going to save, we actually didn't save it because now our revenue goes down. Gross profit goes down. Yes, we cut some of our fixed expenses, but at the end of the day, our net profit is usually worse than where it was before. So while expenses go down on paper, our margin, again, our total gross profit's probably going to be lower because we're doing less revenue and we're doing probably less gross profit to begin with. So that fixed dollar amount that we need to cover overhead and office payroll and marketing is going to actually, it's just not going, the math is not going to math, as they say. So why is cost cutting kind of start to wrap this up? A little bit quicker episode than some of the others, but what I really want you guys to take away from this is really evaluate everything before just going in there and starting cutting things. Usually, our initial conversations when we're having kickoff calls with our clients and first couple strategies, we usually don't look at expenses at all. We're really just let's get our margins dialed in. Let's figure out what does success look like, and then go from there. But when we start cutting costs, it really turns things counterintuitive. After cutting costs, you're going to feel exactly what I said you're going to feel. If we look back 6 or 12 months, you're going to say, man, we cut all our costs, but cash still is tight, or maybe it's even tighter. And now we're leaner, but things are even harder. So this is less enjoyable and people are miserable and they're starting to quit. But we cut all these expenses and we're as lean as we can be, but the business is still fragile. And why is that? That's because cost cutting reduces the capacity of our business. If we're cutting all of our overhead that is actually functional, our capacity lessens, which means we have less support to support the revenue out in the field, which means we're going to do less revenue, probably less gross profit. It's not actually fixing the math of the business. So getting back to our previous conversations, if pricing is misaligned, our labor burden is misunderstood, and we don't address our actual gross profit, our pricing, our cost of goods sold, then cost cutting just shrinks the engine. Think of it. Shrinks the engine or shrinks the foundation without fixing the actual root of the problem. And then what's really frustrating as we look back 6 or 12 months is we ended up fixing the wrong thing. So not only did we spend a lot of time fixing the wrong thing, now we're in a worse position than we were 6 or 12 months ago because we were flying blind. And that's what we do as fractional CFOs is we act as the GPS of where do we actually need to go and how are we actually going to get there. What actually ends up happening along with all the things that we talked about, not even from a measurable standpoint, but morale is going to drop. So when there's aggressive cost cutting, people start to feel it. They start to see it. They start to hear it. Morale is going to drop. Your high performers, they're going to get a little bit nervous and they're probably going to start to leave or they're going to start looking at other opportunities. Our systems and processes, they're going to slowly degrade because we cut technology or we cut some of our marketing, tools and spend, whatever it might be. We cut down some people, perhaps, so we have less people to operate our systems. So our systems are probably going to drop. Quality starts to go down. It becomes like this flywheel, again, like the compound interest going the wrong way, because then we got to undo all of that in order to fix the real problem. And then when we are reactive like this instead of proactive, it just becomes a very, very dangerous place to play. So again, cash might improve temporarily when you see like the first couple payments that you cut, whether it's your marketing, whether it's, even payroll, subscriptions, whatever it might be. It might be like, wow, we are saving a little money. I don't really see it yet, but I feel it because I'm doing these actions. But what happens is all of a sudden the predictability of our business goes down as well. And our number one job here is to help owners create consistent positive cash flow. We need predictable profitability. And when we do that, when we start to make all these cuts, eventually it's less predictable, it's less consistent, leads slow down, and we do not have a way to create that healthy, consistent cash flow. So none of that's going to help anything. Flip side of that, as we start to wrap this up, what are the disciplined operators doing? They're looking at structure before cutting anything. They're going to take a different approach. They don't start by asking, what can we cut? They start by asking, what do we actually need to fix? They spend the time figuring out what is the actual problem in the business. And if they don't know how to, ironically, they reach out to people like me. So that way we can really determine, what do we need to be spending on overhead? What do we need to be spending on marketing? What do we need to be spending on our office payroll? And then what do we need our gross profit to be in revenue and cost of goods sold to be in order to achieve where we want to achieve? So they start looking at that. Where is our margin actually breaking down? Do we actually have a overspending problem with marketing or overhead or office payroll? The answer is usually no. The answer, again, 95 times out of 100, the number one issue with businesses is out in the field with pricing, efficiency, labor, cost of goods sold, all of those things. And the disciplined operator they're figuring that out. They're figuring out what work is great. Where's our, where do we price properly? Where do we need to improve our pricing? Is our pricing actually aligned with the structure we're building? And again, that goes back to previous conversations of we don't need to compare ourselves against any other competition because everyone has a different structure. They're building a different house. They're building a different business. They're just doing things differently than you are because it's a different business. So we can't get in the game of, well, we're aligned with the price over there. Well, who's to say they understand pricing to begin with? So what do we got to do? We got to fix the actual problem. And it usually comes to, if you want to call it contribution, how much gross profit are we contributing to the operations of the business? And how do we get to that contribution amount? We're making sure we are priced properly when money comes in the business. So that way we can cover our cost of goods sold, i.e. labor and material, two biggest things in cost of goods sold. So that way we have enough gross profit to contribute to our overhead, office, payroll, and marketing. That's it, guys. That's all I got today. If cash is tight and your instinct is to cut, please do yourself, do your team, do your customers a favor and slow down. Make sure you actually understand why the business needs to cut before you decide what to cut. Full transparency here. When we work with our clients, again, we almost never focus on cutting things first. We always focus on contribution and are we contributing enough gross profit to the things below it? Because the things below we need, when I say the things below it, it's that foundation, it's the overhead, it's the office payroll, it's the marketing, all the things we need to support everything out in the field. Because at the end of the day, cutting costs without fixing the structure, the actual foundation of the business doesn't solve any cash flow problems. It's going to hide them temporarily. And then eventually you're going to realize you just created a bigger problem. If this conversation resonated with you, head on over to my website, thebluecollaradvisors.com. There you can learn more about how we work with owners, book a call if it makes sense, download our pricing calculator so you know what your gross profit needs to be, and then explore additional resources in the show notes as well. We put up all of our podcast show notes there as well. Lastly, remember, this podcast exists to create clarity. And if this helped provide that clarity, you're in the right place. And stay tuned next week for another episode. Until then, make it a great day. See you guys in the next boardroom briefing.